Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it. It was a quiet Thursday evening, and the sound of rain tapping gently against the windows filled the house. I sat on the living room couch, half watching a football game, but mostly scrolling through my phone, waiting for Clarissa to come home. She was supposed to be back from her book club by now, but lately, she'd been staying later than usual. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, she loved reading, and her club often got caught up in long discussions. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had been growing inside me for weeks. I glanced at the clock, 10:30 p.m. My gut told me something wasn't right. When she finally walked through the front door, the soft click of the lock startled me. I turned to see her standing there, her coat wet from the rain and her hair slightly disheveled. She flashed me a smile that seemed a little too quick, too rehearsed. "Hey," she said, her voice light as she hung up her coat. "Sorry I'm late." The discussion ran long. "You know how those ladies are." "Yeah, no problem," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual. "You hungry? I saved you some dinner." "No, I'm good," she said quickly, avoiding my eyes. "I ate with the girls." That's when I noticed it, her phone, clutched tightly in her hand. Normally, she'd toss it onto the coffee table the minute she walked in, but tonight she held onto it like a lifeline. My stomach tightened, and the unease flared into suspicion. "Everything okay?" I asked, leaning back on the couch, trying to sound indifferent. "Yeah, why wouldn't it be?" she replied, a little too fast, a little too defensive. She headed toward the bedroom without another word. I sat there for a moment, staring at the spot where she had just stood, my mind racing. This wasn't the first time something fell off. A few weeks ago, I had noticed her phone habits changing. She used to leave it lying around, but now it was always in her pocket, always on silent. She'd smile at her screen more often, but when I asked about it, she'd brush it off, saying it was just group chats with the girls. It wasn't like her to be so secretive, and I hated that I was even thinking like this. We'd been married for 3 years and I trusted her, but something inside me was telling me to pay attention. I walked toward the bedroom, stopping at the door. Clarissa was sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to me, typing something on her phone. I cleared my throat, and she quickly locked the screen, turning to face me with that same quick smile. "Long day?" I asked. "Yeah, it was fine," she said, her voice a little strained. She put her phone down on the nightstand, but even then I could see her fingers twitching, like she was itching to grab it again. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "You've been pretty attached to your phone lately," I said, keeping my tone light, but I knew she'd hear the undercurrent of suspicion. Clarissa stiffened slightly, but her smile didn't waver. "Just keeping up with the group chat. You know how it is," she said, shrugging. "Mind if I borrow it for a sec? My phone's dead, and I need to check something." Her reaction was immediate and telling. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to notice. Then as she handed me the phone, her fingers brushing mine a little too lightly, as though she didn't really want to let it go. "Sure, go ahead," she said, but her voice was tight. I took the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't even know what I was looking for, but the way she was watching me out of the corner of her eye made my suspicions deepen. I opened the Messages app, expecting to find harmless banter with her friends. But instead, there was a name that made me freeze. Dad. It wasn't unusual for her to message my father. He was charming, and they had always gotten along well. But why would she be messaging him this late at night? My pulse quickened as I opened the thread. Most of the conversation was mundane, but one message from earlier today stood out. "Can't wait to see you tonight." I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. What the hell was this? I looked up at Clarissa, who was now busying herself with taking off her earrings, carefully avoiding my gaze. I handed her the phone back without saying a word, my mind racing. It was just a message. Maybe it was innocent, but the way my gut twisted told me that wasn't true. I watched as she placed the phone back on the nightstand and climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin like everything was normal, but it wasn't. Nothing felt normal anymore. The evening after my suspicions were confirmed, I drove to my parents' house. The plan was simple: confront my father. He'd been alone for 2 weeks, having sent my mother on a month-long vacation to Hawaii. That fact twisted in my gut as I gripped the steering wheel, every bump in the road fueling the dread within me. The sunset cast long shadows across the quiet suburban streets, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in my chest. As I pulled into the driveway, everything seemed too calm. I walked up to the door, still telling myself it could all be some terrible misunderstanding, even as a voice inside me screamed otherwise. My hand hovered over the doorknob before I turned it and stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet, but the silence didn't last long. The soft murmur of voices from upstairs reached my ears, one familiar, one unmistakably hers. I clenched my fists, every step toward the staircase echoing in my mind. Slowly, I made my way up, each creak of the floorboards beneath me amplifying the tension. The door to my parents' bedroom was ajar, just enough for me to catch a glimpse inside. My heart stopped cold. There, in my parents' bed, lay Clarissa, beneath the sheets, beside my father. They were tangled in each other, their whispered words too quiet to make out, but it didn't matter. The scene spoke louder than any excuse or explanation could. The floor seemed to drop from beneath me, my vision blurred with rage, disbelief, betrayal. The people I loved most, the ones I should have trusted with my life, had broken me in the worst possible way. For a moment, I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to breathe, unable to think. What the hell is this? I finally spat out, my voice louder and harsher than I intended. Both of them jumped, wide-eyed and panicked. Clarissa pulled the sheet up to cover herself, her face a mix of horror and shame, while my father scrambled out of the bed, pulling on his shirt, fumbling for words, but no words came. Daniel, This isn't what it looks like, Clarissa stammered, her voice shaking. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and cold. It's exactly what it looks like. My father stepped forward, trying to speak, but I wasn't interested in hearing any more lies. Just don't. I hissed, my hand already on the doorknob, ready to leave before I lost control, before I did something I might regret. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them in their disgrace, their lies exposed in the harshest light. I didn't know how I made it back to my car, but before I knew it, I was driving again, my mind spinning in disbelief. The urge to escape overwhelmed me. I had to do something, anything. So I picked up my phone and dialed my mother. She answered cheerfully, her voice filled with the sounds of waves crashing in the background, unaware of the storm on the other end of the line. Hey, darling, how are things back home? I swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Mom, I need to tell you something. It's about Dad. Her voice softened, concerned. What's wrong? Is everything okay? No, it's not. My breath hitched as I tried to steady my voice. Dad, Clarissa, they're having an affair. The silence on the other end stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I don't understand, she finally whispered. Are you sure? Maybe it's a mistake. I walked in on them, Mom. Just now at the house. It's not a mistake. Her breath caught, and I could hear the pain seep through her words. No, that can't be true. I'm so sorry. I didn't want you to find out like this. I could hear her struggling to hold herself together. I don't know what to say, Daniel. You don't have to say anything. I couldn't keep this from you. You deserve to know. I'll call you later. I need some time, she said, her voice breaking. The line went dead, and I was left alone with my thoughts, the weight of everything crashing down on me. The people I trusted had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and there was no going back from that. I thought the nightmare ended the moment I found Clarissa in bed with my father. But as I soon discovered, that was only the tip of the iceberg. The days following that horrifying scene were a blur of anger and confusion. I couldn't stop obsessing over what I'd witnessed, playing it over in my mind. Something inside me demanded more answers. Clarissa's behavior had become more erratic in recent months, but in hindsight, it was so obvious. The secretive phone habits, the late-night work events, the sudden interest in fitness that never seemed to show any physical results. I had been blind. One evening, after she had fallen asleep, I finally checked her phone. I'd been avoiding it, afraid of what I might find. But the moment I unlocked it, the cold, bitter truth was staring me in the face. It wasn't just my father. There were love messages from two other men, each with his own time slot in her life. slotted in her calendar with cold efficiency. My stomach churned as I scrolled through the messages, seeing the casualness with which she arranged her betrayals. They're buried in her calendar, were meetings scheduled meticulously every other day, each under innocuous names like work meeting or gym time. The rage simmered beneath my skin, cold and sharp. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was determined. She had destroyed us, but I wasn't going to let her walk away without facing the consequences. That night, I sat down at my computer and began typing an email to every family member on both sides. To all family, I regret to inform you that Clarissa has been cheating on me all the time. I walked in on her and my father, and upon further investigation, I discovered 2 additional affairs. I cannot stay silent in the face of such betrayal, and I will not tolerate deceit any longer. Daniel. I hit send and watched the message disappear into the void, knowing it was only a matter of time before the storm hit. As I sat back, staring at the screen, I felt a strange sense of release. The truth was out there now. My burden was no longer mine to carry alone. The next morning, the floodgates opened. I hadn't fully anticipated the whirlwind that followed. My inbox filled with replies, and my phone buzzed nonstop with calls and texts. Clarissa's family, unsurprisingly, was outraged. They accused me of trying to ruin her, of making a spectacle out of something that should have stayed private. But the most surprising blow came from her mother, a venomous email landing in my inbox just hours after I sent mine. "How dare you shame my daughter like this? She's expecting a baby, and you're just trying to shirk your responsibilities." Her mother's words were filled with indignation, painting me as the villain in this twisted saga. Is expecting a baby. The news felt like a sucker punch, but it quickly gave way to disgust. Clarissa hadn't told me she was expecting. Not that it would have mattered. The timeline didn't make sense. We hadn't been intimate in months, not since before her affairs started consuming her attention. Her family had rallied behind her, claiming I was abandoning her and our unborn child. But I knew better. I wouldn't be manipulated. Her brother, always quick to defend her, called me that afternoon, his voice trembling with anger. "You're a coward, Daniel. You're abandoning her when she needs you the most." I took a breath, forcing calm into my voice. "I haven't touched her in months. If she's expecting a baby, the child isn't mine. But if you want proof, I'll take a DNA test." His silence on the other end told me everything. Even he knew the truth was on my side. There was no child of mine to abandon. That evening, I called Clarissa and arranged the test. Surprisingly, she agreed without hesitation. Maybe part of her still believed she could control the narrative. It took a week for the DNA results to arrive. Every day, I felt the weight of it pressing down on me, an invisible noose tightening around my neck. But when the results came, that noose snapped. The child wasn't mine. The truth had finally laid itself bare, and with it came the end of any lingering sense of obligation. I immediately filed for divorce, knowing there was nothing left to salvage. It was over. I handed Clarissa the papers in a quiet, tense meeting. She stared at them for a moment, her face unreadable. I half expected her to protest, to fight, to weep for forgiveness. But she did none of that. Instead, she merely nodded and took the pen. "I'll sign them," she said, her voice hollow, void of emotion. Maybe she had already come to terms with her own self-destruction. Maybe she never cared at all. But my own personal fallout didn't end there. My mother, who had been supportive through it all, had her own reckoning to face. When she returned from Hawaii, I told her the full story. About the other men, about the Clarissa expecting a baby that wasn't mine, but most importantly, about my father's betrayal. She listened quietly, her face growing pale, but her expression hardening as I spoke. "That man has destroyed this family," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't stay with him." The next day, she filed for divorce from my father. Under the terms of their prenuptial agreement, all property and assets would go to her, the injured party. He was left with nothing, a fitting end for the man who had betrayed not just his wife, but his son as well. In the end, Clarissa and my father were stripped of everything. They had chosen lies and deceit, and now they were left to face the consequences. As for me, I was ready to move on, free of the shackles of their betrayal. The ties had been cut, and I could finally breathe again.